This is the Leo Climaco Podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the Leo Climaco Podcast. Today's episode is going to be out of this world. I mean it. Our guest today is an abundance alchemist, a consciousness connector, Sean Clayton, aka Abundance 10,000. Welcome, Sean.
Dude, great to be here, man.
I am so happy that you're here.
Oh, and I'm honored, man. I'm honored.
I found you on Instagram.
Yeah.
Maybe about 3-4 months ago.
Yeah.
And I've been intrigued by you ever since.
I remember our first interaction.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
It was about 3-4 months ago.
About 3 or 4 months ago, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I saw you and I was captivated by you, and I love your way with words and how you're able to explain things to others. Things that are so complex to explain and to wrap your head around,
Yeah.
you make it very easy to understand.
I've been working on it. Hasn't always been that way. You can ask my wife. I used to make things extremely complicated, and that's because I really didn't know what I was talking about. But kind of as you're chasing that down, they get more simple.
Right.
And then you have to say, okay, if I had to explain this to somebody, to my child, could they get it? And if they can, then it makes it so simple. And then you really know it differently. It's kind of a different way of going about it. But yeah.
Very true.
Yeah.
You always learn by teaching, I think, right?
Exactly.
Let's start from the beginning. Tell me about your background. Where'd you grow up?
Yeah.
Where are you from?
How deep do you want to go? Super deep?
Let's do it.
All right. So originally from Dallas, Texas.
Okay.
I grew up there, and, you know, my mother, her background, she was adopted. So, you know, kind of, I grew up in like this whole like trauma container, I guess you could call it.
Got it.
My father, he was, I would call him a little bit of a Rolling Stone. He no longer is that. You know, he's a changed man now. But in that, growing up in that environment, you kind of see a version of what masculinity used to look like. Right. Which is, you know, this chasing women, trying to be with one person and another person at the same time. And then that becomes a version of your hero. When I was 9 years old, I ended up getting sent away to California, and I was staying with my grandmother there. And my cousin, whose father had just taken his life, unfortunately, a lot of abuse started happening in that window of time. And so that started to break away the container of what I considered safety of growing up in those environments. And
shattered it, probably.
It completely shattered it. Yeah. And so when you go through versions of abuse, sexual abuse, and things along those lines for a period of 4 years, and nobody's listening to you, you lose your voice. And then you start looking at the outside world for aspects of affirmation. Right. And that started to turn me from going, like, as a youth, you're kind of inside. You're very internal. And there's a lot of sitting with yourself, and then you're just getting validated by the world. As you get older, when you no longer have that centeredness and you start to go down the path of seeking everybody's external affirmation, you become nothing. Right. Nothing of yourself.
It's that black hole that's never filled, right?
Exactly. So that put me on this path where I was literally chasing every single version of anything just to get affirmed. And so I became really good at school. Of course, you get affirmed by school. Right. I become good at track and field. I become good at football. I become good at all these things. Didn't love any of them because I didn't know who I was.
You just wanted the praise.
Exactly. All I wanted was praise. And so I went down all these paths, and then ended up, running track at University of Houston, did a little professional running, ended up actually shattering my L1, L2 in my back through the triple jump, shattering my hip joint, my ball joint.
That must have sucked.
Dude, I used to walk with a limp, and I was actually about half an inch shorter. Wow. Which is crazy. Then that's a whole story of how that started to heal itself, which is bananas. And then I ended up starting my own company in my mid-20s, grew it to a $20 million company.
Congrats.
And not congrats. Well, we could say congrats. But then my business partner, who ended up embezzling a ton of money, disappeared with that money. I got stuck with the bill and went to federal prison for 3 years.
Wow.
On a 46-month sentence, yeah. And that was from 28 to 32, 33. Got out at 33 years old. And in that window is where I learned about digital marketing, which is what I do now for a living, where I ended up actually learning how to love anybody. Because every person that I used to see when I first walked into prison, I was completely intimidated by. You go in, you got the gold teeth, the tattooed tears, the guys with the swastikas. And you're like, okay, and I'm at the time significantly smaller. I'll send you a picture, but I was about $160. Wow. And about, now I'm like 210, right?
Yeah, so it's a huge difference.
Vast difference. I couldn't grow facial hair, so I had no beard. So there was nothing intimidating about me outside of maybe the dark skin, but even then everybody else in there is like significantly bigger. So First, I got picked on a lot. But then I ended up learning how to create alchemy inside of prison to learn to love the people in that environment. So that was like my prison journey. And not like the some weird version of love. It's just like you start to become friends with everybody and you start to understand your self-worth and you're no longer afraid.
Right.
And then when you walk out into the real world, you're not afraid of anybody. And so that was a way that I was able to overcome looking at the avatars of the world outside of me and then saying, okay, like this is part of the internal journey. Still didn't get it yet. And then that led into a bunch of where I always call it the illusion. So the world is an illusion. This is a very plastic universe that we're in. And it's very malleable based on how we observe things. And we can get into that later about the quantum aspect of it. But then I started to get sick. So I ended up getting a thyroid condition, had my thyroid radiated. And that tracks back to the fact that I didn't use my voice in my youth. And I never told the story of my sexual abuse. I didn't tell but I would try to tell my parents.
It's crazy how that happens, right?
Yeah, you hide it. So that never got out, but I got sick. And so then at which point I got super, super skinny. And then they ended up radiating my thyroid and I got up to 260 pounds.
Wow.
And I went through this like big flux of weight. And then once I started going through the process of using my voice and starting to just talk a little bit more about this, it led me down a path to where I ended up meeting my fiance in New York. And when her and I ended up, now my wife, but when we ended up meeting, she was into meditation, I was into church. So I'm chasing after the church answer, which is spirituality in a box.
For sure.
And it's somebody else's external definition. And once she opened my mind up to meditation, it's like all this information started to hit me, but I didn't know where to go. So I'm chasing Dr. Joe Dispenza, Sadhguru, all these other kind of entities.
Sadhguru.
Oh, they're all amazing.
Yeah.
And then I'd go back home to my parents and they thought I was bananas because I'm bringing all these different perspectives and they were completely ungrounded truths from my perspective because I didn't know what I was talking about. I was just seeking.
Because you're just changing vibration, right?
Yeah, over and over.
The more you learn, yeah.
Exactly. And then at which point, one thing really started to show. So when COVID hit, I ended up leaving. I was at a big agency, like a big WPP called Mindshare agency, and I was one of their officers. And in New York,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And that's where her and I met. And I started my own agency at the time, and it was like the most scary time of my life. And at that same moment, I was also on my spiritual journey and basically pathing into a window of being completely broke. So went to a Dr. Joe Dispenza retreat, and it was like the last little bit of kind of money that we had, and we just went. And the agency really kind of wasn't doing well. I was doing a lot of consulting and living just check to check.
Right.
Go in there, and I don't know, have you ever been to one of his things?
I've not.
Dude, bananas. So we go in there and you do these like interesting, and we'll kind of get to other stuff. You do this interesting breath and you start to understand different aspects of the quantum. So I'm doing this, and after a couple of days, I'm like, this is BS because nothing's working. I'm not feeling what other people are in there having like spiritual orgasms, right?
Wow.
Screaming and popping off and doing things. And I'm like, okay, this doesn't work for me. I said, if a couple of days I'm not feeling this, I'm out. And we start, and I'm at this time I have hip issues. I'm still walking differently. And my right leg would go numb just probably like once a month, every other month. And it was just problematic. So we go on this thing, walking meditation, and I'm walking down the beach. And at the time, they talk about like trancing out, and I'm just looking, and all of a sudden I start seeing these like circles floating in my vision. And I keep peering in on these circles, and all of a sudden they start to form themselves into this triangle. And then this thing taps me on the head. Like literally, I felt like a bird shit on my head or something, but something tapped me on the head. And all of a sudden I just start crying. And the emotions and the tears just start coming through. And I get chills thinking about it right now. And I drop to my knees, and I'm just like weeping out. Because then at that moment in time, I forgive my family members, for my father, myself, my mother, because she had, a drinking thing. My father was all over the place, other family, cousin, all this other crazy stuff that took place. And I forgave them all. And it was a true forgiveness. It wasn't just forgiving for like trying to get through the situation. It was like,
what's the difference?
So
what's a true forgiveness?
That's a great question. So the difference is that it's not the forgiving because you want to let them go. It's forgiving so that you can truly accept it. And if you know anything about like David Hawking's scale of consciousness, they have all these different areas, and there's this process before you get into reason, to where you can understand any reason for anything, because the reason is the responsibility of self.
Right.
Where you have the ability to accept. When you accept, you detach. When you detach, you can see it as God sees it. So the process of accepting is the doorway to looking at things from the all, from God. And then at which point you understand the reason why it's created. You move into love, you move into joy, you move into enlightenment. So when we have an attachment to anything, we can't ever see it from the perspective of the all, from the we.
Right.
You see it from me. When I see it from me, I'm stuck inside of the system.
In the box.
Yeah, yeah. So that was that first kind of, we talked about it before we got on here, that we moment that I had. And I'm like, okay. And then letting it go. When I got up, my hands like were on fire. And in my 20s, I tried to take my life. I slit my wrist. Then I tried to put a gun to I did all kind of crazy stuff. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody because I had no feeling in my hands. So, I mean, I couldn't pick up anything like at all. And
let me pause you there for 1 second.
Yes.
Because I don't want to let that one go by.
Yeah.
Do you think you did that because you really wanted to kill yourself or you wanted the attention?
There were different versions of it. So there was one time when I wanted the attention, but many of the times I was in solitude. Many of the times I didn't feel like there was any hope. There was one time where it was like I was crying out for help. I was crying out for attention.
Right.
I tried 4 times. Right?
Wow.
From hanging myself and the beam broke to putting a gun to my head, fully loaded, pulled the trigger, it didn't go off, to taking a full bottle of Ambien.
Was not meant to be.
No, it wasn't meant to be.
No.
And then
God got plans for you, bro.
Yeah. It was something else. It was something else. So, and I'm grateful for all of it because of where I am now. But if I could do it all over again, I wouldn't do it that way, right? But I know that I had to get to where I'm at now.
Right.
If that makes any sense. So, but my feeling in my hands came back, right? My right leg was completely healed.
Wow.
The back pain was gone. Like now I don't have that issue. But I used to have to go to the clinic and like do PT for like months at a time in order to get myself back walking again because I would just not be able to walk.
It's crazy how everything that you were holding on to was causing you this pain.
100%.
And the moment you let go, no more pain.
No more pain. And it all is very much so associated where I had trauma in my body. So like, okay, well, because certain things happen in the sexual abuse lane, of course it happens in my lower back.
For sure.
Right? Because I didn't feel grounded and safe, of course my legs were messed up. Right? Because I was over giving all the time. Of course, the right hand, I didn't feel anything anymore. And when I started to balance those things back out, everything started to balance out energetically in my body.
Wow.
Yeah. And then that led into the agency started. So at that whole thing, after that happened, the next day I start getting phone calls where people are just putting money into my bank account. Like bananas, like 7 figures. And I remember I showed Sophia and it was like, all of a sudden, like you hit the lottery energetically and then all of a sudden everything comes in. And then I didn't know what to do with that.
So this was all through breath work?
This was through meditation, awareness, and just energy, like energy healing,
right.
I would call it that.
Right.
And even at the retreat that we were at, there were 2,000 people at this thing. And I remember we signed up for like a raffle where you could get another one. And odds of winning that are pretty limited.
Yeah.
And I ended up winning it, which was, and I stood up and he's like, and then Joe was like, oh, he called me out, Big Sean, I saw you on the beach. I saw your breakthrough. I just want you to know. Wow. And I was like, oh. And so then, of course, I became a guru junkie and started following Dr. Joe for a couple of years after that. And it opened my mind up to a lot of different teachings and things that he would see. But then that just opened my mind up to go deeper. Then I went on this like plant medicine fiasco for a year. And then.
Just did mine 3 weeks ago.
Did you really? How was it?
It's incredible.
Yeah. What'd you do?
I did combo.
Okay.
And then I did ayahuasca.
Nice.
It was
that was the first one?
First time ever.
Amazing.
It's life changing for me.
It is very life changing.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah.
She punched me right in the face. She really did.
Yeah. And I mean, integration after that is everything because that is something I did not do. I just was like on the kick and then it took me about 9 months to integrate.
Really?
And putting a bunch of people through a lot of hell, putting my wife now through a lot of hell. But when we came back together, I ended up doing the Hoffman process. And I would say after that and after our first steps of healing is when this whole other transformation started to happen. So the transformation is always happening.
For sure.
But the person that you see now on social, the things that I talk about now didn't come into me. It was like all of this learning curriculum, and then you get thrown out there. And it was at the top of last year, I posted my first social media video, and it did horribly, right? And I'm like, all right. And I remember Sophia, she was just like, you don't know what you're talking about. Because at the time I really didn't.
Right.
I was practicing. I was figuring it out.
Right. You were trying.
But I kept going. And then it was just like there was an internal knowing and stuff started to drop in. And this different level of consciousness started to come in. And I started writing like crazy and reading like crazy and like just learning different aspects of what I considered everything I could possibly know. And now it's integrated itself into just a different aspect of wisdom that I feel that it's my responsibility to give to the world. And I know that whoever listens to it, if I change one, you change everybody. So that's, but it starts with the change of myself.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you feel it almost sounds like you were clogged?
Yeah.
And then you unclogged yourself, and then this download just started pouring into you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the frequency couldn't connect before because you were so.
Yeah. I was all over the place, and I was seeking. There's seeking, there's finding, and there's knowing.
Right.
That's what I call it. So you seek, and then you find, and then when you find, sometimes your ego takes over, and then when you know, you're really still. And so I was constantly seeking. Then when I found this Dr. Joe thing, I found community that was affirming me. I found plant medicine that I would get these like crazy ass downloads inside of this plant medicine. But in the finding, my ego took over. And then I would sit at this hierarchy on this perch and then tell everybody a thing. And that's how cults start. Right? Because you could sit up there in your ego because you know a lot. You get the download, but you become
what a great point.
Spiritual asshole. You become just a dick, right? And that was the hardest part because you can get affirmed by so many people,
right,
who tell you you're doing a good job. And
that gets to your head.
Yeah, it gets to your head. It gets to your head. And then balancing it out is saying, having somebody in your life, which Sophia very much was that for me, is saying, hey, yeah, that's good. You know that, but how are you integrating it? How does it mean anything? And that's that masculine and feminine coming together.
Right.
When you have somebody that yin yangs you.
It's beautiful.
That's why relationships are so important.
For sure.
And it doesn't have to be, it's not a, hetero, homo, sexual relationship, romantic thing,
right,
anything like that. It's just another person that you're accountable to that can look at you and call your bullshit.
Right. Accountability.
Yeah. And that was a big, big opening for me that I didn't like at first because you want to be in your ego. You want to be right. But then once I realized that there is no right or wrong, there just is, you get into that knowing.
It's just something else you're holding on to,
Exactly.
wanting to be right.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's go back to your business, to your partnership for 1 second, because that was really, we just waved right over that.
We did a whole bunch. Yeah, we did a fast move.
What business were you building that made 20 mil?
Yeah.
And was he ever caught?
Never caught. It was a medical staffing business. And so my first job out of school was medical staffing. Got in there. Once again, wanted to see everybody to affirm me. So I outworked everybody. I pulled the Kobe Bryant and just worked my ass off. People were making 100 calls a day. I'd make 300.
Wow.
And then I grew to VP when I was like 24 years old in this like 1,000-person company. And
overachiever.
Yeah, overachiever for sure.
Yeah.
And then my my business partner, he had an IT staffing company. He's like, oh, you should join me. I brought my clients. Got sued really badly because I took my clients. It rectified itself and then it grew really quickly. So no, he never got caught.
That's crazy.
Wasn't for him to get caught. Everybody has their own prison they live in. I needed mine to release myself from, at the time, the family that I was in because it wasn't healthy for me.
Did he use you? Did he strategically plan this to put the blame on you, do you think?
I don't think so.
No,
I think he saw an opportunity
and took it.
Yeah. And it was at the time banking was slow. There was a thing you could do with factoring, and if you just double factor invoices, go from one to another, and things don't move quickly, this happens.
Right.
And I ended up trying to save people because of it, and did a bunch of crap on the dark web to. I can go deeper in the story if you want, but essentially the nuances of the story are. He ended up double factoring money. Bank comes in and says, you owe us money. He disappears, goes to another country. I'm left with the tab. I asked the hospital, a couple hospitals we're working with if we could advance bill them. One of the hospitals took care of it. It was a tune of $600,000 that we just had to make up because the total overall thing was like $6 million. We paid off 5.4 with the money that we had. We had $600,000 left. And that $600,000, because he didn't have capital expenditure approval to do things, ended up kind of getting him stuck. And so I ended up, after he sent me the money, he got in trouble because he didn't have the approval to send the money a year later after getting audited at the hospital. I jump in, go to the dark web, find a way to send emails between him and his boss for approvals, stick them in his, I know, right? Stick them in his inbox, say, hey, dude, check this out. He ends up getting off. Another year goes by, the hospital gets audited. They see this IP breach. They come to my house. And basically that's where the whole thing started. And I'd never gotten detention or in trouble or anything like that. And I was like, oh, the federal agents come in. I tell them like, oh yeah, here's what happened. They check my computer like, oh, you're right. They let me go at the time. And I should have watched more TV. Shut my mouth. But I was just, I was scared at the time. And
what made you think of that to go to the dark web?
Because I was just looking up like how can I get this fixed inside of their system? So of course hacking, of course this.
Right.
Never done any of those things, and that's what ended up me sending these like dumbass emails.
Got it. So that's what got you locked up.
That's what got me locked up. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. And they were like, oh, you have options. If you fight us, you already told us everything. You'll go to prison for 9 years. If you plea out, you get this. We won't deal with your family because my dad was in the company, my sister was in the company.
Wow.
Or you can like help us hunt this guy down. I'm like, I don't even know what that means, right? So, that's not a thing. So I just plead out.
Become an agent and go to different countries and hunt this guy down.
Yeah. So I just took the deal, and I'd say it's one of the best things that happened to me because it got me out of a really tough family structure that I was in.
It's a reset, right?
Yeah, it was a reset. Yeah. Because I was married at the time. It wasn't healthy. And it got me out of that. And I was such a people pleaser, I never would have left on my own. So it was like my higher self, called me into this experience.
Right.
I never would have been able to look at, because I grew up in a very white community, probably tell by my voice, but I
love how real you are.
Yeah. I grew up, my dad would be like, oh, you don't want to be around this type of person. So, these things would happen, and I would go to the hood or do something like that where my grandmother was at, and I would just like stay afraid. And then you go in there, you're like, hey, like there's black TV room, Mexican TV room, white TV room. Yeah. Go into the black TV room. I go in there, they call me white boy. And I'd be like, okay, and I'm too small and I'm this and that. And so then you have to learn how to navigate that, and you got nowhere to go. It's not like you can just not come back.
Right.
You're not going to just stay in your bunk all day.
You are who you are.
Yeah. And so eventually you don't adapt, because I never changed myself, but you just learn to find commonalities with everybody. And if you can do that in there, you can do that anywhere. Yeah.
What does abundance alchemist, what does that mean? What's an abundance alchemist?
I don't know too many of them, number one.
I don't either.
But so alchemy, we all know what alchemy is. Alchemy is being able to take one substance and convert it to another, right? And abundance is just, the expansiveness of the all, expansiveness of God.
Right.
So if I can take the expansiveness of God and convert it into anybody that I meet, any experience that I have, and go from that I state to the we state, that's really what that is. And so what I do with that is work with people to help them step into their abundance. Most people look at that and say, oh, I want to make more money. Right. So that's the initial thing. I want to make more money. I'm like, okay, I can help you make more money.
For sure.
Fine. Like, let's do that.
That's part of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's start there. 9 out of 10 times, the men that I work with, they're like, I want to make more money. How's your relationship with your partner? And they'll be like, oh, well, I'm cheating on her. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. That's why your money's off. Okay. So your money's off because you're not being in integrity of the feminine energy. If feminine energy is receivership, then you can't do that. So in essence, the first keys of abundance is how are you dealing with the energy in your life? And if you're not doing that, then you can't receive.
You're not in alignment.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's what the abundance alchemy means.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is a consciousness connector? Because they sound a little similar to me.
They do sound kind of similar. Consciousness connectors is what I consider kind of a networking tool of finding, what I call is we're all on the puzzle pieces of life.
Right.
And they all have connection points. Oftentimes what ends up happening is I take my puzzle piece and I try to shave off pieces of it to try to snap somebody in that looks really good to me. And that is out of alignment. So when you think about conscious connecting, it's the fact that I'm built a very specific way. I have a very specific signature that the divine gave me to observe life through these eyes that I have, which is just a reproduction of the all. But what ends up happening is if I try to force and will my way into anything, I'm not receiving the right individuals in my life, or the ones, I don't like right, but the most harmonious individuals in my life. So it requires an aspect of surrender. So what I teach individuals, if you want to build a network or connect with individuals, it's not about reaching an ego and like chasing after things. It's actually being so still that you start to pay attention who shows up in front of you and how you connect with those individuals, and do it in a space of vulnerability, which is very, very strong. Right. Do it in a place of surrender, which is like, hey, I'm completely detached from it. Open. And then working in those spaces so that you can, once you get past, on the Hawking scale, once you get past courage, then it starts to move from the willingness to the, to the acceptance, to the reason, to everything else. And that's where love starts to bloom, and you get away from all of the unharmonious or fear-based cycles that you could be going through.
Hawking scale.
Yeah.
Let's go into that, because what you just said right now reminds me a lot of power versus force, right?
Yeah.
When you try to force things, it doesn't quite work.
Yeah.
When you use your power, it just manifests itself, right?
Yeah.
Break down for me your understanding of the Hawking scale. Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. So for those who don't know what the Hawking scale is, we'll go there really quickly. So David Hawkins, he was a really, if you watch his videos, a lot of people like to listen to him.
Yes.
Some people, it's not really sexy.
It's very dry.
It's pretty dry. But he does a lot with muscle testing. He's built a scale where it scores individuals based on whether you're sitting in grief all the way up to enlightenment. And so you kind of know where you are. And then he's, in the book, he talks about where Jesus was on the scale. He talks about like where Martin Luther King was, all these people, of how they move, Gandhi. And it scores them. The most dangerous thing about the scale is that it's a scale and it has a hierarchy in how you perceive it. So if like, oh, well, I'm at fucking enlightenment now, I'm better than everybody else. Well, that's not true, because every other piece of the scale has love inside of it. And so one of the things that I teach when I work with individuals is the fact that there's love imbued in everything. There's love inside of shame. There's love inside of anger. There's love inside of grief, because it's all something seeking something, but it's love doing its thing to work its way back up into the wholeness of itself and become fully expanded. And so the way that I see the scale is less as a scale and more of just like a spherical kaleidoscope of how all of these different pieces of what we label as emotions work together. Because we only label them because we've been taught to label them, right?
For sure.
The feeling that we have is more of a somatic thing. It's not necessarily it's not real, right? So when I say I feel shame because somebody told me what shame feels like. Okay, I've been taught that behavior, and so now I go into my corner and
kind of like fear, right?
Yeah, and then I do this thing called shame. But now I can say, okay, well, if I go outside naked right now and I stand on the street and somebody starts laughing at my junk, right? If that were to happen, then I could be like, I could feel shame because like, are they laughing at it for this or that? Well, that's my own internal issue. Or I could stand up and I could laugh at it, and I could be like, hey, I'll laugh with you, right? So what is the perspective that I'm seeing it from? Because I made the choice to do something, and can I stand in the truth of that choice instead of cowering to the way that the world is viewing me? Because shame is only a reflection of how you perceive the outside world based on something you've been taught. So to the point of Hawking scale, real quick, is that David Hawkins, his intention was not for us to be on a hierarchy. The intention was for us to be able to understand how love is seeking its way through this entire apparatus so that we can find our way back and unprogram ourselves from the program to allow us to see everything as love.
Got it. With that said, is there a fixed point within that scale? Right? I know that the scale is not really the most ideal way to view it, but let's use it for a second.
Yeah.
Let's pretend that someone is at a level 500.
Yeah.
For example. Is that a fixed frequency that person's in, or do they bounce around from up and down within their day-to-day, and that's their average, and that's where they reside at, but they move through different levels throughout their day, whatever's happening throughout their day?
Nobody's at a fixed point.
Okay.
Right? I mean, you're not at a fixed point right now. Even now, you look like you're at a fixed point.
Right.
But the earth is moving, right? And so even that, you're still not at a fixed point, right? Even the vibrations of ourself are constantly changing. And so we're never at a fixed point. So even to your point, if you were like, I've hit 500, yay for me, right? And this is great because that's a wholesome number inside of the actual
For sure.
scale. Once you say that you're there, you're not there. You move immediately, right? Because our ego and the way that
It clashes.
It clashes, yeah. And Rudolf Steiner talks about this thing called the way of initiation. You're always, anytime you think you're somewhere, you're going to put something in front of yourself to prove to yourself that you're there or not. And can you actually hold that container?
Right.
So the minute that I'm at a 500, something's going to push back and push me to a 499 or 400 or whatever it might be.
Right.
And then I have to come back and say, okay, I'm here. And then the point of that is to be able to break through and actually move up the scale. All right. And then also to be able to encompass all aspects of the scale to see everything as one. And then once you Terrence Howard talks about the
Yes.
straight lines thing. There are no straight lines.
Yes.
It's moving everything to a curve so you can see from every perspective of every dimension. And then once you do that, the scales go away, the hierarchy goes away, the straight lines go away. And then when you're at grief, you're looking at grief from a space of enlightenment. When you're at shame, you're looking at shame from a space of enlightenment. Everything becomes love. And then that becomes where the breathing just flows. And it's a beautiful space to be in.
Break down for me why some people aren't able to move up or are, I don't want to use the word fixed because you just, but they're not able to cross over the barrier that allows them to move into acceptance. Because they, how do I put this? They think that the illusion is more real than themselves. They don't realize that they are a creator. People don't realize, I mean, we are a true reproduction of God. Right. If you know anything about any of the, quantum experiments that have gone on, there's one that Wheeler did in 2007. Double slit?
Not the double slit. Well, there's that one too. But there's one, we can talk about double slit. We can talk about Wheeler. So Wheeler in 2007, which is a more recent version of this. Right. Is that Wheeler took 2 cameras, right? And then he had a photon shoot through this maze. And one camera, he turned it on, right, over here, and it changed the trajectory of the light of where it went, right? And then he turned that one off, and the same photon, and then he turned the other one on, and it took another path. So how you observe it from whatever your space of consciousness is changes the past that you were in, the direction of the light of where it goes and where it went, and the energy of how fast it takes to get there. So from a quantum, it's mind-boggling. It really is. It's nuts. And this shit is everywhere, dude. I mean, they have broken at this point, they have broken the speed of light. So it threw Einstein shit out the window. They realize that there is no time, there is no space, there is none of this stuff. Scientifically now, like it's gone, right? Even though we're in it, because we need the senses in order to survive. And this thing we call life is a fractal of God in order to then go through the process of understanding what we're creating, right? But people don't break out of those cycles. I know that was a lot. But people don't break out of those cycles because they feel like this cup is real, more real than what's inside of them. Okay. They feel like what they've been taught over how many ever years of programming that they've been taught, the books that they've read are more real than what the possibilities are. Okay. And once you understand what the possibilities are, and the possibilities are infinite creation, eternal creation, like once you understand that, you can create anything. Right. And then there is no time. So now you're snapping realities into place from the perspective of self. Now, the problem with it is that other people don't, like if I say, okay, I can do all this cool stuff, but the rest of the world doesn't think that because they're observing me, I get locked in my own little prison because the world doesn't see what I can do. Right. And then at which point I can only do so much to the limitations of where their mind can go. That's the fucked off part about this experience, right? And the beautiful part about it. So that creates a barrier for you, even though you can see past it because they can't. Yeah. You're not able to create that reality. Because they're observing me and everything around me. Got it. Right? So that's where collective ascension comes together. And this is what Jesus was talking about in the Bible, right? If we want to go down Jesus' path, is that when we all see it that way and we all see it from a collective aspect of what is possible, then we all ascend and everything changes and all the technology will change. Right. We will no longer get sick. Everything shifts. When that happens, because that's the code Christ, Messiah, left for us. And there's no accidents that there's a 0 point in time that has reflected out from BC and AD. I mean, that's a pretty monumentous 0 point in time. It really is. It could have been anybody else, anything else, but we zeroed time then and we went this way. And then there's all this evidence of how that is actually basically a supersymmetry of itself where it's reflecting itself out. You had Abraham in 1900 BC. You have quantum physics in 1900 AD. Abraham channeled the book of creation. You have Einstein and all these other individuals channeling the quantum physics. It's like it's parallel happening over and over again. That's incredible. Yeah. Buddhism, 500 BC. You have Islam and modern Hinduism, like modern Hinduism, modern Hinduism in 500 AD. Okay. These things happen literally as like reflections of each other. Judaism, 500 BC. Like it's like nuts when you look at it. Wow. Right? So if we understand that code that's been left, and if we it's not about like, hey, Christ is the only way and all this other stuff. Right. And then you get lost in that. It's the fact that there was something left for us to understand how we can collectively ascend. And if you understand quantum physics and you understand that the observation creates the reality, and no matter how much I observe it, I can make miracles happen in my own little mini sphere.
Right.
And it's beautiful when it happens. But what the problem is that when other people observe it, then they collapse that wave function into a different potential. And then it's me and them fighting against that energetically. That's the spiritual warfare that we're in, to be able to then change that vibration. And then once I change that vibration, everything shifts, because if we all see it that way.
Right.
But if right now we all said a plane couldn't fly, the entire world said it, they would all fall out of the sky. Pilots would forget how to fly them. The technology would stop working. That's how powerful we are as human beings.
This reminds me of our money, the dollar.
Yeah.
Right. It's basically, it works because we all believe it works.
There you go. It's nuts, right? And it can work faster because we all believe it works faster.
Right.
So that's why we create these little these groups or these collectives, which are really powerful. It's like if you get in a group with like 10 other guys and like, hey, we're going to manifest a bunch of money, it'll happen. Right? Because you're all observing each other into that. Now, when it goes wrong is that one person in there gets jealous because somebody's doing really well or better and they want the thing that they want, which is why in the commandments they say don't covet other people's stuff.
Right.
Because when you covet it, then you start to collapse the wave function. Even that, the 10 Commandments is code for how to actually create abundance. Like it's all left in the Bible. Like we turned it into some fucked off religious shit.
Right.
But it
put
really
us in a box.
Yeah. But it really is like abundance code. And once you start,
there's some good in there, right?
There's a lot of good in there. There's a lot of good in there. It's when we contain it into something else. And so when we understand the possibilities that are in it, and it's just like how once you get what the scientists have been teaching us over the last 100 years,
right,
and you apply that to what religion has attempted to leave for us, because like the truth is always rising out of it, no matter how much they fuck the book off, right? And you pull those pieces out and then you apply it to the quantum possibilities that are there. That's when the abundance starts to grow. And then we just have to take that code and then work with it and then walk in that path.
What do you think is lacking for humanity to ascend, for everyone to get it, to click and see the same thing?
We pay one, we don't have a integrated spiritual practice that is unified. Okay. And it has to start with like a simple baseline of like how the rules work in this universe. Okay. Every religion is built off of these rules. All right. And these are the Hermetic laws. So the Hermetic principles, if you go into this, which is why even the first book of Genesis, it's 7 days. Those 7 days are code for these 7 Hermetic principles. Okay.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I know, right?
Look at that.
It's nuts.
Yeah.
Okay?
That just clicked. That just ding, ching.
Yeah. And so like you can map each one of those. Like
wow.
From, God, created, it was, spoke, right, into existence.
Let there be light.
The mind is the all. So the minute I think something, it's light. Like all of this then maps through. Okay. So those 7 days are the 7 same Hermetic laws, right?
Well, that's incredible.
And then those laws are the keys of the universe, of the baseline of how human beings are constructed. Okay. And then what ended up happening is that you've got, so if we understand that as a baseline of how to move into spirituality, then you can look at any religion, whether it's, Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, any of these, and you can say, okay, all of this works that way, and you can honor any of them because they're not separate at that point.
Right.
Okay. That's the first thing. Once you understand those 7 laws, and I can break down the 7 laws if we want to go down those really quickly. Okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
So the first one is, the all is mind. So like everything is the mind, it says the universe is mental in the mind of the all. So it's, in essence, when you think something, it becomes something, The second one is everything has a vibration, everything is energy. Okay. And these are the first 3 are the laws of isness, what I call isness. And then
isness?
Isness.
Okay.
And I'll explain that in a second because there's no balancing to them.
Got it.
And then the third law is that everything is as above, so below. As within, so without. Everything. The law of correspondence. This is just how it is. This is also the Holy Trinity. Okay. Not to do the Illuminati symbol, but it's
I know what you mean.
But it's the Holy Trinity because it's the Father is the first one, the Mother, is the energy, or everything's a vibration, everything is energy, and the Son is the correspondence. And I've shifted that to be less of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and now it's actually the Father, Mother, Child, because you put the gender back into it, which actually helps that become less of a masculine structure.
Got it.
Okay, and so these are the first 3 laws that actually make up like the isness and the foundation that everything else becomes balanced off of. Okay. Then you have the next 4 laws, which will all have to be balanced.
Yeah. Everything is mind.
Yeah.
Everything's frequency and energy.
Everything's frequency and energy.
As above, so below.
As above, so below.
Got it.
Yeah. Everything has correspondence to it. You know, and that's where you find the patterns in like Fibonacci's and everything.
Right. Right.
You know, you've got this, you know, fermions and bosons that function just like the universe. I mean, it's like the craziest stuff, like the quantum scale and the large scale is all the same thing. Okay. So then you go into everything has rhythm. This is where you have balance, because as the pendulum swings to the left, it swings to the right.
Right.
You're going to have good days. You're going to have bad days. Once you understand that.
Music.
Yeah. Everything has rhythm. Yeah. Everything has a pulse. Your breath, all of it, right? Everything has polarity. There's duality and extension to everything. So that's the box and the container that it lives in, which allows us to then create balance. All these have balance. When you can balance your rhythm, you can balance your polarity, you can balance your karma. Everything has cause and effect.
Right.
Right? And every effect has a cause, every cause.
Could also be out of balance, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And everything has gender.
Right.
Everything has a masculine and feminine entity to it, right? Even ourselves, it doesn't matter what it is.
For sure.
All have that. So when those are in balance, you have right brain, left brain hemisphere. You have a masculine side and a feminine side. I have a masculine side of my body and a feminine side of my body. And so all of these different areas, once you put them into balance, which is the bottom 4 laws, which is the balance is the Christ consciousness of being able to hold this stuff like in balance, then at which point you know how all religion can be constructed.
Got it.
Okay. And that's what stops people from ascending, because they don't understand those laws. So once you get those laws, then you're like, oh, all right, well, when this happens, well, was I the effect or was I the cause?
Right.
All right, well, how do I become in balance with that? All right, well, if I'm, like abundance coaching, if you're off in your masculine energy, right? Or if you're off in your feminine energy, this is why your shit's fucked up, right?
You're imbalanced.
You're out of balance, right? If you're seeing only the good in your life and you can't honor the bad stuff that happens because that's how you've labeled it,
right?
Then all of a sudden, every time the bad stuff happens, you're going to get kicked in the ass. That's the law of rhythm, right? It comes this way, that way. If you're out of balance with your breath, if I was always breathing in, I'd be pretty fucked up, right? And if I didn't breathe out to the capacity that I'm breathing in, then I'd have some kind of like carbon dioxide poisoning.
For sure.
Off,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
It wouldn't make sense. And
what a way to put it.
Yeah. And then if you don't have, if you don't understand everything has polarity to it, like there's a duality to everything in life, right?
Light, dark.
Yeah, light and dark, good and evil. Everything has a container to it. And the more that I honor all sides of that container, the easier it is for me to hold it. Because if I call the evil bad, this is where Satan comes in. If I call the evil bad all the time, and I'm constantly chipping away at this side of the container, what happens if light comes into me and I'm a representation of the possibilities of that container, then all of my blessings roll out to who? To Satan.
You're giving it power.
Yeah. And it just gets sucked away. So now if I say, hey, you know what? Not to say, yeah, I love you, Satan, right? I mean, but you do, because it was an aspect of creation. You hold that space because you're no longer looking at the devil as your enemy. You're doing what Christ did in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights. You're saying, Satan, get behind me because I'm going to actually lead you. Okay, that's what he was saying. He wasn't saying, like, get the fuck away from me. He said, get behind me. Okay? Because
that was so good for me to hear. That was powerful.
Yeah.
I like
when
that.
I learned that, it was like, it gives me chills again when I think about it. But yeah, it's wild.
Wow, make him your friend. Don't hate him.
Friend. Yeah. Yeah, and it doesn't mean that, because when we serve it,
right,
that's the problem.
Right. Don't make him your friend by serving it, but make him your friend by leading it.
Leading it, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because any negative entity wanted to do was be loved. Imagine the baby crying who just wants to be loved. Imagine yourself crying when you were a child that just wants to be loved. And what happens when you didn't get loved? You had a tantrum.
For sure.
You tore some shit up.
Cried more.
You made it worse.
Yeah.
That's all that Satan does, right? Energetically.
That was deep. I like it. I like it a lot. I want to ask you 2 related questions that I saw you give an answer to this. It's about forgiving God. Okay. But first, I want to ask you, why do you think the world exists? Why do you think we're here? Why do you think God created humanity in order for it to have this experience?
So, great question. We exist because there was a hesitation. Okay? When God and once again, this is a perspective. Okay. To me, when God spoke anything to existence, it was an isness of God. And it was like, okay, it's like to imagine a circle. It's just a circle. Well, how do I experience that? Well, I have to then have a perspective of what that looks like. So then I separate myself. No different than like when, the sperm goes into the egg and then it splits into two, right? And so it split and it looked at itself and it goes, oh, what the fuck am I, right? So in the questioning of what it was, okay, that questioning of what it was like, if you imagine you have all the power in the universe and you question something, it'll just create infinite fractals. Like boom, like all of a sudden. And then it's like, well, how can I then conceive what this looks like? Well, I have to make a thing called space. Well, then there's 3 dimensions of space. So then I have to create what's perspective look like, north, south, east, west, up, down. I have to create these 3 dimensions.
Right.
Well, that's just sitting there. So now I have to put a time to this so that I can reflect this and understand what relativity looks like. Einstein, understands all that. So then I can look at it from this perspective and that perspective, right? And then at which point, once that happens, it's like, okay, well, now I have to infuse this with myself. That's the 5th dimension. That's why we're called 5th dimensional beings, because that's where spirit comes in. And I'm infusing all of this through all of the infinite perspectives, because all of creation has already happened and it's done. Okay. We're just at a point of time where we're witnessing it a little bit. Okay. And we then give feedback back to the all. And the more that we give feedback back to the all, okay, the more that our life becomes whole. Now we can give it shitty feedback or unharmonious feedback. We can give it harmonious feedback. Our purpose in life is to give it as much harmonious feedback as we possibly can, because then it knows itself, okay, all the possibilities that could ever be created, and the feedback that it's dropping back to us in that experience of linear time is now starting to do the work that it always intended. To be no different than, do you have kids?
I do.
Okay.
I have 2 boys.
Once you see your kids figuring it out, you're like, okay, this is great. I can let it go, right? But for a while, you're like, fuck.
Right.
I created this little guy, okay, and they are all over the place.
Yes.
I've got a 16-year-old. He still pisses on the toilet seat, okay, and sometimes I do, but he still pees on the toilet seat, and I'm like, one day he's gonna figure this thing out.
Yep.
Right. And until it does, it's like, hey, stop, and you keep getting poked a little bit, and that is because because that's a reproduction of me. I'm a reproduction of God. I'm a reproduction of my father too, but, and my mother. But as I'm a reproduction of God, and the father and the mother are both looking at me and saying, hey, figure this out, and nurturing me along the way, the only way they can nurture me is through other versions of itself, is through having me trip over myself, is through having me have self-doubt, the same self-doubt that it had when it created more versions of itself, right? And the more that I can resolve that, it gives it the feedback back that it created its path the way that it intended to. And then it becomes more whole again. And then that's our job, is to give it that feedback back, even though it doesn't need it, because it's already done, because there is no time to it. It already did all the experience. We're just in it, but we have the opportunity to, in that free will choice, to acknowledge what it was and then create this thing called heaven on earth. And once we do that, then the whole thing kind of snaps back together, and then we live a completely different life at that point.
Wow. So, because it's already all taken place, right? I was going to ask you, when we evolve, does it evolve? But I guess the question is kind of irrelevant, because it's already happened.
Yeah.
Right.
It's already evolved.
Right.
And it's already pulled us through. And there are some of us in life that it has recognized for it to like, hey, figure this out now, and then it gives you tools and resources to expand it out. Like, I mean, imagine if Jesus had social media, right? Or Moses had post that on Instagram.
Man.
Right? Like, fish flying in a boat. That would have been pretty sick, right?
Yes, it would have.
Talk about a viral video.
Walking on water.
Exactly. Any of this stuff. Any of these miracle workers at the time. And so now it's at the space to where I feel like it's going to be less of those type of miracles and more mini miracles through a bunch of collective individuals that have the ability to expand themselves using the technology that we've been giving. So the evolution is the evolution's already done. Like, we had examples of that. You had your Moses and the Red Sea. If you want to take these, you have Buddha, right? You've got, you name
Krishna.
it. Krishna. Any of the stuff Billy Carson talks about. name it. You've got all these individuals, Egyptians and whatnot,
Mesopotamian,
yeah. Aztec, Incans, all these miracle
Atlantis,
all of it, highly evolved, way past what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
We just now, the space we're in now is less of like one big badass entity coming in and being like, hey guys, this is it.
Mm-hmm.
And all of us at an equal playing field having similar resources, similar AI, similar technology to be able to spread the word and see each other at the same time. Because social media allows me to see each other at the same time.
Oh, instantly,
right?
Yeah.
AI allows me to communicate with each other, like it allows me to normalize the language, so we get away from like the Tower of Babel breakage into like a structure that it all sounds the same. We're all singing the same rhythm. We're all saying the same tune. And it's not a socialistic thing. It's us recognizing each other. And to the point we were saying before, it's the observation of this like collective ascension to where now all of a sudden we're seeing each other the same way, and then boom, it pops. That was the course correction that I sense that why we've evolved technologically,
right?
That all is given us as an opportunity to do that. Like, there's no way that I'm going to go out there and walk on water,
right?
But I'll be able to say some really cool stuff and visualize it in a meaningful way that'll pull people in and be like, oh, that's a thing, and then we all do it, and then boom, it just happens.
You just showed me how social media is required, in order for all of us in this, all 8 billion of us, to be able to get on the same frequency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's
incredible.
Cheap, it's inexpensive. Everybody has access to it. People call it the like devil's work or whatever.
Yes.
It's really not.
It's really not.
No.
Wow. Okay. Now on to forgiving God.
Yeah.
What does that mean? I've been struggling with that. What does that mean?
All right. So, and this is one I've been struggling to deliver well too, because people are like, why does God need forgiveness?
Yes.
Yeah. God doesn't need forgiveness. Okay. We forgive God, not for God, but for us.
Okay.
Okay. And if, let's say,
it's us forgiving ourselves,
it's us
basically,
forgiving
right?
Ourselves. But you go back and read, 20 days of news. You're going to see sex trafficking issues. You're going to see children getting killed. You're going to see all kind of crazy stuff happening in the news.
For sure.
Right? All of that was created by God. Now what happened is there's like this devil God and there's this good God and there's all this other stuff. So we put all the bad shit in this bucket right here.
Right.
But the source created everything. It created the bad shit. It created the good stuff. We only label it as that.
Right.
And so when we go through the process of saying, you know what, I'm actually going to forgive that which created all of that so that I can release my attachment to it, and I don't see it that way anymore.
Got it.
Then it releases all the trauma.
It's like forgiving God, forgiving a child cancer.
Yeah. 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 But then you say, okay, God, it's okay.
Right.
Because you had to do that in order to do whatever process you're doing that I have no concept of what
right.
it could be.
Right.
Right. Because it's not a bad thing. And oftentimes a child gets cancer to teach somebody else something.
Right. The parent or whatever.
The parent, whatever.
Yeah.
Right. And then the parent's like, oh, now my life was exponentially changed. And then they go out and they do more of the work. And it's always a course correcting mechanism that happens. But we don't forgive God for God. We forgive God for us so that we can release the trauma associated with those things, because we hold on to so much trauma in order to validate who we are.
Mm.
You know, be like if I said, oh, I was sexually abused, I went to prison, I tried to kill myself, I did all this other stuff. I'm black, so I got slave trauma. I've got all these other things.
Right.
And then I hold on to that in order
playing
to
that victim
myself.
card.
Yeah. Why would I do that? And then I could say, okay, well, now I've got past life trauma I got to deal with. So I'm going to go back to all my past lives. Fuck, I could play whack-a-mole with past life trauma for the rest of my life.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you get to the source and forgive that thing that created all the potential trauma that has ever been and could be, then it no longer impacts you.
What a cheat code.
That's what it is.
Yeah. It's like a shortcut.
Yeah.
I see it.
Yeah. It makes a huge difference.
Yes.
Yeah. So whenever I get something that pops up, I'm like, oh, I forgive God, but I also know I'm reproduction, so I'm forgiving myself. I'm forgiving all the experiences that could ever be. And every time it always surrenders itself.
I feel the peace.
Yeah.
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 Why do you think there's this huge cutoff from the ancient world to us? Why were they so spiritually and sometimes technologically more advanced?
They They didn't have the distractions, number one. They knew themselves. I mean, imagine if you had just a really small community. Once again, it's the power of consensus creates reality.
Right.
I don't have any external anything. And if it's 50 of us and we all believe this thing, we're going to start doing miracles in our own little pod. Now what happens is another pod comes in and then challenges, oh, can this be still enough? Once again, it's kind of like Christ on the cross died for what it believed in.
Right.
Would you be willing to stand for what you believed in? So then other cultures come in and they observe this as a test of an initiation. And like, okay, fine. And then it starts to normalize itself. So what happened over time, you go from, let's say, 10,000 people on the earth that could view something in a very specific way,
Right.
to 8 billion people that are all questioning
With
each
8
other.
billion different views.
Yeah.
Got it.
Now we've got this very odd diversified entropy that's taking place that has nothing to do with our potential of creation. So if the world gets small again, which is why these extinction events happen, so that we can actually reset ourselves, it won't happen that way again because we'll remember this time. That's the target, right?
Right.
But it then would recollect itself. We become miracle workers, and okay, I can do all this amazing stuff, and then here you go again. That's the reason why it's different.
Terrence Howard.
Yes.
How much is he there, or what's real, what's not? How much do you actually put stock in it?
I'll say this. Terrence is definitely a polymath. Okay. He sees stuff in a way nobody can. He has had a lot of, and I'll say this for the listeners and watchers. So I know Terrence, pretty well.
Okay.
Yeah. Like about 2 years in talking with him.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And done a couple podcasts with him, things like that.
Very cool.
Yeah. Great guy. And he's super tapped in. Super tapped in.
He seems extremely connected.
Yeah. He is, he's definitely there with a lot of stuff, and he is, like Walter Russell's work, he's reviving the shit out of it.
Yes, he is.
And Walter Russell, never really was seen a lot. I mean, he had his college, stuff like that, but he is creating a lot of magic in that space. The linchpin is a real thing. I've seen it fly. I've seen it do its thing.
Really?
It's actually a real deal thing, right?
Wow.
It needs to be industrialized.
Okay.
It needs some funding. So once that happens, I feel like some amazing things will take place off of it.
You don't think the government is already on it?
To fund it or get involved
Or
with
to
it?
build their own, or, no?
It's going to be hard. It'll be hard to build what he built. You have to have like a little bit of an esoteric reach and faith to go there. And the practicalness of where the government wants to go with it, I think it'll be a challenge. He's presented it to them and whatnot, so we'll see what comes out of it. I don't know.
For those who don't know, can you break it down exactly what that is exactly?
The linchpin?
Yes.
So the linchpin is a tangential flying machine that Terrence built using the geometry of the proton and the geometry of hydrogen. And so what he did is he took the flower of life, he broke the flower of life apart, and he created this geometry that could extend out into a three-dimensional structure that created a flying apparatus called the linchpin, right? He could create other things from that.
Right.
But essentially that the curved shape of what he calls the tetrahedron, when you stack those things together in a very specific way, it'll actually create this these dimensional polygons.
Which look really cool.
Yeah, they're super cool.
Yeah.
Super cool. And then when he put that together and then he put rotators into it, it started to fly. And he's like, oh, well then could it go this way and this way? And then he started playing around with simulations. And then he realized that he could build this like crazy bonding machine that they just snap together. And like all of a sudden he could have this mass plane that's like picking up structures and flying things left and right and back and forth for very limited cost. Like it wouldn't really cost anything to produce this.
Wow.
Yeah. And it can even, there's aspects of his technology that I've seen that can process like hydrogen fuel sources and stuff like that. So he could pull, stuff out of the air and keep it moving, especially once it gets in outer space.
I was watching his, he did 2 podcasts with Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the first one, he was talking about the periodic table.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of how you describe the map of consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's fluid. It's not, right? It's not static. It's not something that one falls into the other and they all connect in a curvature way.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's so absolutely. I mean, the periodic table, the way that he broke it down. I mean, have you gone pretty deep in Walter Russell's work on that?
Not as deep as I want to.
Yeah. So basically, Walter Russell
but I have a top level understanding.
Yeah, he states that everything happens in tones and octaves, okay, and that the universe is created off of initial, which is why God spoke. So the speaking, the tone that took place of whatever that emission was, created all of this possibility. And then what happened is it started to accelerate itself out. And then you have, they've gotten down to like 10 octaves, okay? And each side of one of those octaves, okay, there are 7 different positions that roll inside of those octaves. Once again, the number 7, the 7 Hermetic principles, because you have, it goes from like negative, it goes from 0, 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So it goes from like negative 3, 2, 1, and then to 0, negative, and then it goes to positive. And this is the inhale and exhale. So it's just like our breath. It does this thing in each one of the octaves, right? And then you have this middle point that goes to 0.
Okay.
That's called bisexual energy. That you've probably heard Terrence talk. He mentioned it, and it's like, what the fuck is he talking about bisexual? Because it's the meeting point of the positives and negatives coming together, or the masculine and feminine coming together inside of that. And what they've proven, and like what's interesting about Walter Russell is he won awards, and I believe the Nobel Prize for this.
He won Nobel Prize
for identifying, using the same structure of periodicity to outline where elements were coming next, and even elements we can't see.
Wow.
Because there's octaves. I think we sit in the 3rd octave. So there's octaves 1 and 2 that we can't see. So hydrogen kind of starts at this 3rd octave, if I'm not mistaken. I don't have shit in front of me right now. I need a Jamie to go like, hey, hit this thing and pop up a deal.
Yes.
But I believe it starts in the 3rd octave, which once again, where we start to recognize ourselves is in the 3rd dimension, right?
Wow.
I mean, you look at these kind of correlations.
It all connects.
It's nuts. And then you have these 7 different versions that end up emitting themselves. And then that's what forms like these crystal structures. And I can get into that, like sodium and NaCl, like come together. They are like the -2 and the +2 in 2 different octaves that come together. So they're bringing the octaves together to combine themselves into a crystalline structure, right? All of the different crystals that we see in life are basically 2 different elements that have combined themselves from 2 different octaves to bring those 2 worlds together.
Wow.
Right? We are that as well. So there's stuff inside of us, like in our DNA and the way that we function, that does the exact same thing, that creates these crystal structures, these unbreakable bonds.
It's just mind-boggling.
It's really nuts.
It really is.
Yeah, yeah.
It's so hard to grasp that that's what we're made of,
Yeah, yeah. And so we're like a walking crystal structure that's very pliable, but at the baseline of what we're made of, it's all of that. So you were talking about the periodic table, how I then go through the process of breaking down, the Hawking scale of consciousness.
Yes.
It's kind of the same flow. That's
same
there.
idea. Yes.
Yeah. And then he has, Walter Russell has a thing called the cosmic clock, which essentially is like how all this stuff moves through like the cycles of time. So then you can like look at it through time of this is going into the 4th dimension of how all of the periodicity starts to expand itself through those different areas of this thing called the cosmic clock, for those if you want to research it. That's a whole rabbit hole right there. We don't have time to discuss.
It is a whole rabbit hole. No, it really is. We are running out of time.
Yes.
We are definitely going to need to do a part 2.
Yeah.
Because I can talk to you all day.
For sure, bro.
I want to know what's next for you.
So now what's next for me is I'm putting out information around what I call the Messiah Code, or the Code of the Messiah. And it's all the clues and prophecies that we've been left, and how they scientifically derive themselves through quantum physics and how they show up in the world.
Wow.
And this, I have like a first course coming out on 8/8, which will drop then that people can get into.
That's a good date.
It's a good date.
Portal, yeah.
Yeah, it's a portal, yeah. So that'll drop then. And that'll be I taught a little bit of this at this Consciousness Expo with like a bunch of scientists and whatnot. Handful of them got it, some of them didn't. So it gave me some things to refine off of.
Okay.
But I'm super excited to deliver that because I feel like, my way of delivering what I call spirituality is in a sexy, cool way, make it culturally relevant.
Very.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
Yeah. It's got to be fun.
Yeah. I think your editing is so good.
Thanks, bro.
It's really good.
Thanks.
It really helps. It really helps you visualize what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Because I think what you do very well with your reels is you allow all senses to be activated.
Yeah.
I can see it. I can hear it. I can't smell it, but I can feel it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it really provides a well-rounded information that I can grasp.
Yeah. Well, and my point, my purpose in that is that everybody has part of this code inside of them. Like there's no possible way I could ever know it all. 8 billion people, I guarantee you know it all.
Yeah.
Okay, collectively.
Right.
So that's where if we all come together and we give everybody the
puzzle
resources,
pieces.
snap together.
Not forcing it.
Not forcing it. And giving people access not only to the code, but to the tools and understand how social media, how AI, how all these things play into it.
Right.
When all that snaps in, it's like, oh, okay, this is just the first step to like another amazing technology that's going to open up for us. And we're not chasing it. It'll just come to us when it happens. And
when it happens or when we're ready?
Both. I guess it'll happen when we're ready, right? Yeah.
It's true.
But yeah, it'll all just happen. And when it all just happens, there's like a massive, we'll live longer. Like our DNA, even there's a Scientific American article. It's on my IG that I posted in my links. We're supposed to be living for thousands of years.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. We've just convinced ourselves to live shorter. We're not supposed to live this short. Like we're really not. And so there's an aspect of longevity.
So you're saying that our body is designed to live for 1,000 years?
Thousands of years. Yeah. I mean, thousands of years.
Thousands
of years. We are meant to live that long. We kill ourselves. Okay. Through the observation. Once again, the collective observation. We destroy ourselves because, black men, 70 something years. All right, fine. Gone. Now they'll push it to 100 years. Let me give you the code to like live to 120. Well, if you do this and eat the blue stuff and all whatnot, like you'll live longer. All that stuff is there.
Right.
But there's also code that allows us to live much longer, but it allows us, we have to observe each other that way.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you, bro.
Thank you. I feel like you've expanded my mind and my understanding in a lot of things in just 1 hour, and I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Phenomenal. I love that there are people out there like you who really grasp and understand this and is able to teach it to others in a manner that is easy to digest,
Yes.
and wrap your head around it and not feel so small and lost in this grand, vast world of ours.
Yeah. Yeah. There's not one way to go.
No.
There's always to go. Right. And when we understand that everybody's on their divine path and we just give them a little bit of a roadmap,
right,
everybody's going to find their way.
And you're very good at that, at basically pointing out that we're all in this together.
Yeah.
We're all in this journey, in this roadmap together. And the quicker we realize that, the quicker we'll ascend.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Where can people find you? What is your website, IG, coaching program?
Yeah. So IG Abundance 10,000. So definitely check it out. Website, have a marketing company, and we're actually, so you were talking about the editing.
Yep.
One thing we are going to do is make that available to as many people as possible.
Very cool. Smart.
That storyboarding and the way it works and being able to pull that spiritual alignment
It's
together.
super creative how you pick what image to go with what you're saying.
Yeah.
It aligns very well.
Thank you.
No problem.
Myasin.io is our marketing agency. We'll have a place for people to go to drop in to do that kind of work. Repeatable and scalable. Scienceofabundance.ai is my coaching program, so definitely check that out. And I'm on TikTok. I just don't vibe really well there, and I'm working on the YouTube thing right now, so we're getting there as well. But
awesome. I got 2 more things for you. We're going to do a quick rapid fire.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you 10 quick questions just to get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah.
All right. And then we'll close out with a tip or a nugget.
Okay.
Favorite book?
Dude, that changes so much. Right now, it's this book called Biocentrism by Robert Lanza. It's been really eye-opening for me. Yeah.
Favorite movie?
Favorite movie? I'm going to say the standard one, The Matrix. Yeah, I can watch it over and over again and find something new. Yeah.
Favorite food?
Favorite food? My wife. I'm kidding.
I'll leave it at that. No. Next. Favorite car? Hey, man, that was a good answer.
Yeah. No,
favorite car?
That just kept coming to me.
Yeah, it's all good.
Favorite car? The one I have now, I have this Range Rover, and it's a beautiful drive right now. I really enjoy it. Yeah.
Favorite song?
Favorite song? What a Wonderful World.
It's a good one. Favorite place to visit?
South of France.
Okay.
Yeah.
Never been. Have to go.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Favorite hobby?
Talking about this shit.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
It's a good hobby.
Yeah.
Favorite sports team?
Favorite sports team? I don't have one anymore. It used to be the Saints.
Okay.
Yeah, for a long time. And then it was the Cowboys.
Drew Brees?
It was before Drew Brees.
Before Drew Brees.
And it was like when they were horrible. I just liked
the Aints.
energy. The Aints, yeah. And then it was the Cowboys. My uncle played for him, Tony Dorsett. So
that was very cool.
That was a vibe, yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Favorite drink? Alcoholic or non-alcoholic, whatever it may be?
Shoot, I guess, dude, mezcal. Yeah.
I like that too.
Yeah.
Sean, if you can give a tip or a nugget to a struggling person that can't seem to align or get out of their way, what would you say to them to help them come to a place of acceptance, a place of love, a place of peace?
It'd be three things. One, remember to breathe, right? Your breath is the only thing that you have that you can do anything with that keeps you alive. You can speed it up, you can slow it down. So you could slow down time, you could speed up time. So when you remember to breathe and you do it in balance, it changes your energy. Number two, have gratitude for all things. Gratitude for everything in the past, gratitude for everything in the future. And then number three is start thinking about yourself as the we. So you have a past, present, future version of yourself. That is your we state. You have everybody else that's observing you. That is the we that's outside of you. Then you have all these cells that are inside of you that are individual,
right,
and also part of you. And that's the we of you as well. When you start speaking in the we term and you start talking about it, you start doing your affirmations and that, your mantras, it'll completely change the way that the world shows up for you.
Man, that's so powerful.
Yeah. Thank you, brother.
Breathe.
Yeah.
What was the second one that you said?
Gratitude.
Gratitude.
Yeah.
Extremely important.
Yeah.
I feel like most people just ask and don't say thanks.
Yes. Yeah.
And the last one?
Is we.
We.
Yeah.
That's probably what I took in the most is we.
We.
Yeah. Not I, but we.
Yeah.
Sean,
dude,
incredible.
Love it, brother. Thank you so
man.
much.
I love you too, man.
No,
Appreciate you so much. Thank you for coming out here.
Yeah.
Thank you for making time to be on the podcast and just shedding a light, giving hope, and showing everyone our path.
Yeah.
And how we can get there. And thank you for guiding us and leading us.
Yeah. No, thank you for, we wouldn't be here without each other. Honestly.
We would not.
Yeah.
Awesome, man.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
All right.
Guys, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Make sure you like, subscribe, hit that bell notification. Go check out Sean's IG. It's incredible. Go check out his coaching program and his course, and we'll see you guys next time.